Okay. Good afternoon. Here's a Sphera emoji. They say a fellow once came home one day about Shuva, a nice new married couple, a few weeks after their wedding after Pesach, and he asked his wife, "What's for supper tonight?" And she says, "Yesterday was spaghetti and meatballs." Okay, you don't get it? It's a Sphera Omer. Uh, okay. Let's begin.
Am I allowed to eat during class?
Absolutely.
Not.
No, totally. Enjoy.
Over
If-
here or there?
if
No,
the choice
you
is
don't need to enjoy it. I thought.
Wow, yeah, you also have to bring a chatas.
You have to be miserable.
You have to enjoy and connect to Hashem
You have to enjoy
through every bite, through the enjoyment of it. Then you don't have to bring a
enjoyment to serve
chatas.
Hashem.
Yeah, exactly.
בצמח חיים ביטול.
Should feel Hashem's love in every bite.
It's 100%.
Okay, everyone help me out. We're going to start off with a little review, and then we're going to go to a deeper analysis. What is the law if someone forgot to count one night?
Count for a day with no bracha. Unless it's the 49th day.
They must count the next day without a blessing.
That's what unless it's the 49th.
Yeah, so hard. What about the next night?
Count with a bracha.
Bracha.
They resume counting with their blessing. And we're going to put the question out, where does this come from, and why is this the halacha? And we'll get to that in a moment. First, another question. What is the law if someone forgot to count an entire day?
No bracha.
Now,
Continue count.
actually, they must continue to count, but without a bracha. That's the full answer. They still have an obligation to count. People don't know this. They thought they missed it, but it's actually still an obligation to count. Just cannot do the blessing. You try to hit a blessing with someone else, and so on. Why? Next scenario. What if someone is not sure if he counted last night?
Count
without a bracha.
And then you count with a bracha.
They should count by day without a blessing. What if they did not?
Count with a bracha.
What's the halacha is you actually resume counting with a blessing.
Yeah, good, bro.
She wasn't sure.
I don't remember.
Listen to the next scenario.
Forget.
Wait, if someone not sure, you understand this case? If he's not sure he counted last night, they should count by day with their blessing. But if they definitely did not count by day with their blessing, but there's a possibility they counted the night before, then the halacha is they resume counting with their bracha.
So if I do it twice,
What?
if I do it twice, like first
Do it a
night
million
I
times.
forget, I'm not sure, and then another night I forgot, and I'm not sure the day after, and I missed twice.
But if both times, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. You'll
But
soon see.
70%.
Well, you'll see why. No, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. You're asking a good question. It's 75% instead of 50%. We're gonna get to that soon. Okay? But it's not. This is not a. You'll see the reasons for this when we get to the sources. You'll understand. Okay. So to understand where all these laws come from, we're gonna go travel back in time to three ancient Talmudic debates or Talmudic commentaries debates. Okay. So let's get to the sources. First is Shkachat Pratis. We could also call it a parsha class. It's not just a Sphera Omer. Today's parsha, this week's parsha, is the source of Sphera Omer. Usvartem lechem b'macharas haShabbos. From the second day of Pesach. Might have another class about the whole thing with these words, but not today. From the day that you bring the Omer, which is the day after the first day of Pesach, which is called Shabbos. Sheva Shabbos is Primus Tiyana, which is a waved offering at Tanufa. It should be 7 weeks. You count for yourself 7 complete weeks. They should count 7 weeks. To me, my Tiyana, they should be complete. The Torah adds the words that you should count 7 weeks and they should be complete weeks. Okay? That's what you want to get. Oh, you have some English here. On the day on which you bring the Shiva of elevation over, the day after the Shabbos, you shall count off 7 weeks. They must be complete. See how it's a special phrase. They must be complete. You take note of that. Now, then you continue counting until the conclusion of 7 weeks, and then it'll be a special Yom Tov. A mincha chadash l'Hashem, a special offering of new grain from the wheat this time. You start off with barley. By Shavuos, you do an offering of wheat. This is the Yom Tov of Shvi Shavuos at the 50th day, until the conclusion of the 7 weeks. This is what it's in this week's parsha. This is how the Torah presents the mitzvah of counting the Omer. Not to be confused with the mitzvah of offering the Omer, which it says about it right before, which is first it presents the concept of offering the Omer on the second day of Pesach, and now it presents the mitzvah of counting the Omer. Let's see a little piece of Gemara. Okay? Menachos, page 66a. Omer Abaya. Anyone want to help me out with that translation?
Abaye said.
Great. Mitzvah lemimni yoimi u mitzvah lemimni shvui. The mitzvah of counting has two components to it. There's a mitzvah to count the days, and there's a mitzvah to count the weeks. Mitzvah lemimni yoimi u mitzvah lemimni shvui. There's two parts to the mitzvah. They're like the tefillin, according to some opinions, is the shal rosh and there's the shal yad, right? The tzitzis. There's the white and there's the blue, right? There's different components to various mitzvahs. According to Abaya, there's two parts to the mitzvah spheres Omer. That's why you ever notice you count it. You don't just count the days. You mentioned that it's this many weeks and this many days. And so on. Why are you doing all that? Because this is what Abaya taught. That the mitzvah spheres Omer has two parts. You got to count the days and you got to count the weeks. Then Rabbanan debate Rav Ashi, the rabbis of Rav Ashi's yeshiva, Manu Yaimi Umanu Shvu. They counted days and weeks. Rav Ashi, take note, is one of the later rabbis in the Gemara. That means Abaya and Rav Ashi, they're way after the destruction of Beis Hamikdash. Abaya says it's a mitzvah to count days and weeks, and they actually did it. They did the same thing exactly what Abaya said. Omer, another rabbi says, what did he do? Mani Yaime v'loy mani shvui. He only counted the days, he didn't count the weeks. He disagreed with the previous two teaching side. And he said as follows, when asked, or to explain his behavior. Omar, he said, Zeicha lemiktashu. It's not really a mitzvah anymore. There's no Beis Hamikdash. There's no offerings. The count is supposed to start from the day you offer the barley offering in the temple, and then at the end you have the wheat offering. We don't have that now. It's no Beis Hamikdash. So no, it's just rabbinic. It's just Seichel HaMikdashu. It's just remembrance for the mitzvah that used to be a mitzvah at the time of the Beis Hamikdash. The rabbi said to still do it, but he understands that since the rabbi said to do it, they didn't make you do it so seriously. You don't have to do it both the days and the weeks. So he counted just the days. Okay? Everyone got this Gemara?
Yeah.
Tosfos quotes the words, Zeichel HaMikdashu. Just a remembrance for the Mikdash. Let me know if I'm going too fast. Is everyone with me?
Perfect.
Zeichel HaMikdashu. Nira, because it's only a Zeicher, it's only a remembrance. It's another way of saying it's rabbinic now, because there's no offerings anymore. So it's the whole mitzvah of counting is based on the offering that's done the second day of Pesach, the barley offering. We don't have it, so it's only rabbinic. That's why Omer said, I only counting days, not weeks, because the whole thing is not so serious anymore, meaning it's not the same weight, it doesn't carry the same biblical level obligation. So based on this, Taisha says, it's permitted to count during twilight, when it's not clear, you could count like when it's still, you're not sure if the day started, like by Shabbos, we're stringent. But here you could count already. You could consider it, it's already the next day, even though it's between Shkia and Seis, between sunset and nightfall. You could still count totally with the bracha. You don't have to wait for sure, because it's known, it's a known principle that when it comes to rabbinic things, that's why many communities daven Ma'ariv earlier, because Ma'ariv is the Rabbanan, and they'll say Shema afterwards.
They don't do.
We don't. Chabad is makbid. I don't want to go into it now.
No, I'm talking about they don't do Sfiras Ayra by Plot.
Yeah, they're gonna do, because we'll soon see the machlekes. But Taisha says based on Omer that since it's rabbinic, you could treat it like rabbinic, and for other laws as well, and you can even count it early because Safek Rabbanan is lakula. It's another principle that if it's something is only rabbinic, you could be lenient. Like Shabbos, for example, is biblical. You can't work on Shabbos. Now, everyone agrees that's binding. So when it says, that's why our Shabbos is 25 hours. Why? Since we're not sure if it's night or day, that extra hour in the middle when it's twilight, so we have to be stringent. We don't do work from when the sun sets until the nightfall the next day. What rabbinic things, for example, telling a Gentile not to do things on Shabbos, you could do during that time. because they had started that. They said not to tell Gentiles as a precaution so people shouldn't abuse Shabbos. Not going to go into that whole topic now.
It's
And
our
they totally let you do it during this time because there's nothing wrong with doing it anyway. The rabbinic things you could be lenient if it's that. So the same thing he says you could count the Omer then.
It's only tzarech mitzvah or something.
Yeah, there is a few conditions, but it's not so simple. No, we're gonna have a whole class on that another day. But Oid Omer, Taisa says additionally, Afilu b'yayim samach chashecha adif. Shum tmimas can be on the yell. Like the Gemara said earlier, we're gonna get to this more about this later. But some say it's even good. It's better to do it a drop before. That way you'll have it. Because the count should be complete. He could understand it as it should be complete units. Each day should be completely counted. If you let some of the day pass and then you count, well, the first few minutes were not counted in your count. You counted a little late. So there's a concept Tosis is saying to count at the first moment possible, or even right before the day, the last moment before it begins, and you count at the first possible moment. So then you actually counted it in the most complete way, because the whole thing was included in your count. It's like you counted the entire day. If you counted a few minutes after the day started, after sunset even, it's already not a full unit was counted. That's what Taisus mentions.
And we do it.
Einira, Taisus disagrees with that. He says that's that's not necessary, or it might be problematic because you might be counting early. So better don't count that. Don't go for that fulfillment of the concept of tmimos, that it should be complete. This is what Taisus brings. Now let's see the Rambam. The Rambam was a contemporary of Taisus because Taisus spent 200 years, and the Rambam was during that time. The Rambam is mentioned in Taisus actually, even though they were totally different worlds. He was Taisus were Europe, but they heard of the Rambam already, of course. And
Rambam is a big G.
the Rambam was. Remember, the Rambam lived from 1135 to 1204, almost 70 years, and he says as follows: Mitzvahs asay lispar sheva shabbosis tmimos v'yom avosar, to count 7 complete weeks from the day of bringing the Omer. Then he says, Mitzvah zu akol ish mi Yisrael b'chol makam b'chol zman. This mitzvah applies to everybody in any place. And he adds the word v'chol zman. What does that mean? Even when there's no Beis Hamikdash. Even when there's no Beis Hamikdash. That means it's biblical. He says. It's a biblical mitzvah even when there's no Beis Hamikdash. That means he totally seems to disagree with what Taisha says. It's totally goes with the Gemara's implication that it's rabbinic. But the Rambam says, no, it's biblical. Sfiras Omer is even biblical now. How did the Rambam learn the Gemara? Didn't we have a Gemara that they had a whole discussion? Did the rabbis make you do it the days and the weeks, or just the days? But it seemed to imply no one was arguing that it's rabbinic these days, because there is no offering anymore. So look how the Rambam learned it. Omer Abaya, mitzvah l'meim yomer, mitzvah l'meim shvua. Right? The mitzvah to count both. Rabbanan devei Ravashi manu yomer manu shvua. Ameimer manu yomer v'loy manu shvua, and he said zecher l'mikdashu. The Rambam translated this that only he learned the Gemara as follows. Only Ameimer says zecher l'mikdashu. That's why he counted only days. The other rabbis, which is the majority, Abaya, and the sages of Rav Ashi's yeshiva, they counted both days and weeks. Why? Because they didn't feel it's just a Zeichel Mikdash, that it's just a remembrance to the mitzvah that they kept, like we do Morah still, just to remember the mitzvah they used to do with the Korban Pesach. No, the Rambam understood our Gemara as concluding that it's saying that it's only according to Ameimer, it's rabbinic. But the other rabbis disagree. That's why they counted the days and the weeks, because it's still a biblical mitzvah, the way it's presented in the Torah.
Is that how we learned it? How else did we learn that?
Well, Taisvus learned it, that this is binding. Why? Because Ameimer was telling them, why are you guys counting days and weeks? It's only rabbinic, meaning, don't you agree it's rabbinic? We do, but they felt the rabbis instituted it to be with all the the details the way it was originally with the days and the weeks. And he said, no, since it's only rabbinic, you don't have to do the whole thing. But everyone agrees that it's rabbinic. That's what Taisus learned. But I have it here. Taisus says all opinions agree that counting now is rabbinic. And I have the words again here, you can see it. And Rambam says only a Omer holds that counting now is rabbinic. So you see that whenever there's like a debate, this just comes from two ways of learning the Gemara, and it's always the case. There's always, whenever you see in Shulchan Aruch, different opinions and Rishonim, when it's coming from holy, reliable rabbis, it really, there's always a way to explain how they reach their conclusion and how they understand the Gemara. This is a great illustration of that. You see how you can learn the same Gemara, and the Rambam concludes that basically, he says that the main opinions are that it's not rabbinic nowadays. Shir Omer is a biblical mitzvah. And the Placer says, no, it's rabbinic according to everybody. It's totally rabbinic. Now, what's the foundation of this? Possibly, or how of the Rambam saying it's still biblical. That's the real thing I want to suggest an explanation. The Rambam says it's still biblical. The perspective that it's rabbinic seems to make more sense because we don't have the offering. There is no offering now. We don't have the Omer. And the way the Torah presents it clearly is, look at it. First it presents the Omer offering. I'll just do it. I'm not going to do all the text to you now. Tell the Jews that when they come to the land, they should bring on the second day of Pesach an offering of barley. And they should do it in. And then afterwards it goes on, after this, all these verses, it says that you should start counting from the day. So the Torah clearly links the offering, the counting, to the offering. So why would the counting be a mitzvah without the offering? How does the Rambam look at it? So I want to suggest that this is the way, this is how the Torah presents it, right? That the Omer of offerings, second, and I did this in the other class, remember? I'm recycling this slide. And you count 7 weeks, 49 days. Offering of the number 2 breads made from wheat, new grain permitted in hell. This is how the Torah presents it. It's all, the count is based on this. We don't have the offerings. So how does the Rambam look at it? So remember the Ran? The Ran cites a medrash that we don't have, but the Ran is pretty good. Ran was a few hundred years before printing, so the Rishonim very often cite medrashim that were lost, unfortunately. But he brings this medrash, and the Rebbe cites it also as well. And I think this could explain the Rambam's view very nicely. He says that there's a medrash that says, "B'shasha amar lahem Moshe," when Moshe told the Jewish people, "Ta'avdu l'selakim ala harazeh," that you're going to go out of Egypt and you're going to serve God on a certain mountain. You're going to have the revelation. Hashem's going to reveal Himself to everybody. The Jews responded, "Amrullah Yisrael, Moshe Rabbeinu emasai abaydazu." Moshe, our teacher, right? When is this going to happen? When are we going to have this encounter with Hashem? This relationship with Hashem is going to start. When is it? It's going to be at the end of 50 days. And they counted, each Jew was counting on their own 50 days. This is the year before they were given the mitzvah. The mitzvah was only given this week's parsha, Omer, which is a year later. They were told about this mitzvah that has to do with the offering of the barley. This has nothing to do with that. They were counting to receive the Torah. And this is a timeless concept. A preparation for the Torah, you count, you work, prepare yourself, you work on yourself. And this is a counting that has nothing to do with the offerings. And this could be part of the Rambam's perspective, why he understands, and he takes that understanding of the Gemara, why it would be still biblical without the offerings. It's not only connected to the offering. This is what the Medrash says. Based on this, the rabbis established it, but the Rambam seems to learn that it's still biblical, and also perhaps because of this concept, that there's an aspect of it that has nothing to do with the offerings, and it's independent of it. It's preparing for the re-experience, the receiving of the Torah. Okay. Just to finalize this first debate, the Alter Rebbe paskins not like the Rambam. Mitzvah zu neheges be'eretz u'b'chutz la'eretz. The Rambam says the Alter Rebbe paskins that the Alter Rebbe brings that this mitzvah applies in the Holy Land and in the diaspora. Bifnei habayis, v'shaloi bifnei habayis. In the time of the Beis Hamikdash and also not. Then he brings, however, there are those that say, Shebizman hazeh, in our days, ein Beis Hamikdash kayin, when there's no Beis Hamikdash, ve'ein makriven ha'omer, and we don't have the offering of the Omer, which is a measurement of barley. Ein mitzvah zunei heges klam b'divrei Torah. This mitzvah is not binding, it's not applicable on a biblical level. It's only rabbinic. Shetiknu, that was established Zeichel HaMikdash. The Fein Iker, and the Alter Rebbe adds the words on the second opinion. This is the main opinion that we follow, like Tosfos understands the Gemara, that this is what we paskin, that it's not considered biblical. The counting of the Omer without the offerings, despite the Rambam, which is a big deal, because the Rambam is a very, very, heavy opinion in halacha. But when all the other Rishonim seem to have understood the Gemara in Menachos otherwise, so sometimes the consensus will follow the other Rishonim even against the Rambam. Let's go to debate number 2. Tosfos says like this. This is the Tosfos continuing. You ready? What does that mean? And where or when somebody forgot to count all night. Hosak Bahag, Shesayfer Bayoy. The Bahag says, just count by day. And this would be the seeming implication of a Mishnah later in this chapter. That was 66a, this is 71a, where it says the Tanan mitzvasa balayla liksa. The mitzvah is to cut the Omer offering prepared by night. The miksa bayayim kosher, but if you do it by day, it's kosher. So seemingly that would be the implication that the same thing with the counting of the Omer, which is linked to the offering of the Omer, that if you didn't count it by night, you count by day. You know what that means? The Bahag is saying, Tosfos cites the Bahag. Bahag is the Baal Halachas Gedolos, Rabbi Shimon Kayara, who lived very early, in the time of the Goinim. It's nothing to do with Rabbi Yosef Cairo, who lived like 700 years later. It's Kairouan, I think it's another place. Anyway, he says, if you miss by night, you count by day with a blessing. You have to realize what he's saying. According to the Bahag, if you missed by night, you totally count by day and you recite a blessing. Because you could do it you're supposed to do it by night, but if you do it by day, it's totally fine. That's what the Bahag says. And Tosfos disagrees. Iker, he says it, I think it's more correct. Another Mishnah in Tractate Megillah, page number 2, chapter 2 of Tractate Megillah, page 20b. And it's cited later in our chapter. It says the entire night is, and only the night. And it says whatever is by night is all the night, but not more than that. So Tosfos leans and says you have to count by night. Okay, let's see how they learned it. So this is debate number 2. Counting by day. Bahag says you count with a blessing by day. There's nothing wrong. According to Tosfos, according to Tosfos or Rabbeinu Tam, it's counting by day is not an option. If you missed by night, there's no point in counting by day according to Tosfos. No one says what we do. You realize? But this is we'll soon see how it evolves. The Bahag says you count by day with a bracha. Tosfos says you missed it. If you only could count by night. By day, there's no point in counting at all. Why would Tosfos, I should add here, why would Tosfos say you have to count by night? What would be the svara for this? We learned something before. Remember the verse says, remember I told you to make note of that phrase? It says to count the weeks and days, and then it says they should be complete. Remember we saw from the beginning of Tosfos that he considers completeness that it includes the night. There's 2 units in a day. There's day and night. If you didn't include the night, at least part of the night in your count, you didn't fulfill what the Torah said the way to count it, which has to be complete units. The day consists of two parts to it, the night and the day. So according to Taisus, you have a whole night to count to be able to count. But if you missed a night, you didn't. You missed part of the. It's not complete.
Retroactive? Can't make it retroactive.
We'll soon see what happens the next day. That's the next slide.
Taking
Taisus continues.
David brings that because it's connected to the Omer, and just Kavala Kosher Laktiras Omer.
Yeah. And he says that's what he follows, which teaches you that, and only it says. There, that Mishnah says only during the night. That's what it implies. And that's what Taisus says.
But he only brings the part of that it about the Omer, the Tziras Omer, but only by night. But the part of Tmima is he's not bringing that over here.
Right, he doesn't. He says that in the beginning of Taisus, which I cited before. And I'm suggesting that as a svara, why taka only by night? Why does it? Why would it be by Tmima?
Because it's there to the Mikdash, just like in the big.
Okay. Well, there's more. Why even connect the harvesting to the? So another discussion, but I'm not going to go into a name. To the counting directly to the harvesting. It is technically separate concepts. But let's see. Next part of Taisus again, another debate. Oit pasak behalachas gdelis. The Bahag again.
Same thesis.
Yeah, same Taisus. 66a. She'im hifsik yom echad v'loy siper. If you missed one day and you didn't count, the Bahag says, Shuv einu sefer mishum deboy tmimus. You require tmimus. The Bahag says you no longer could count because it has to be complete. And if you missed one whole day, you missed the count. Utei magdailahu v'lo yitachin. Taisus says is a shocking concept. I don't understand his interpretation. It's not correct. It cannot be that this the way the Bahag says it. He totally disagrees very strongly with this Bahag. So we have another debate. The Bahag says if one misses a day, Bahag says it's all over. Try again next year. And Taisus says you're totally fine. Count the next day. You know what this means? According to Taisus, you count the next day with a bracha. If you miss 5 days, count the next day with a bracha. There is no concept. Taisus learns that Tmimos means when you count, it should be by night. That way you fulfill Tmimos. That it should be 2 units. And the Bahag learns that Tmimos is on the whole count. And if you miss a day, that's how you didn't fulfill the completeness of it. And that's why the two debates tie in. First, what is the basis for these debates? The Tmimos, here I put it. It says Tmimos Diyena, should be complete. Right? What would make something complete? So you could say that Taisus learns it's a unit. A day consists of 24-hour day, has a night and a day in it. And if you don't have both in it, it's incomplete. So debate number 2, Taisus says counting by day is not an option. Why? Because it has to be complete to fulfill the day and the night in it. But Bahag says it's fine. Why? Because he learns complete is telling you that the whole count has to be complete. And you can't miss it a whole day. And there's nothing wrong if you count even the last minutes of the day, it's totally fine because you counted that day. He doesn't use the concept of completeness on the individual day. He uses it as a requirement in not missing a whole day. But according to Taisus, he uses it for you have to count by night. And then you have by night, you include also the day. That's how you have completeness. But if you miss a whole day, you still have to count. You don't have any source not to count anymore. Just count properly. As long as it's by night, you can still count. Even if you miss 5 days, the next time it's at night, you could count. But if it's by day, it's like you missed the 6th day already. Because you missed the night. Because according to Taisus, the completeness makes a requirement only to count by night. To have a whole unit. But there's no concept of completeness that's anything wrong with missing a whole day. You saw how strongly he argues with the Bahag.
What?
Does
Taisus have any more to explain what?
In the beginning, you saw what he said, that you would even be a concept of counting at the first moment, even before, so it should be Tmimos. So you see how he thinks. That's why I'm basing this on. You see how Taisus looks at it, that Tmimos is used to include the night also into it. It should be Tmimos, and it's both true. He says halachically you could count some of the night, but as an Inyan, to count as much as possible in the night, early in the night, as early as possible, so it's more Tmimos. It adds more to the Tmimos. But that's beyond. I want to finish up this, and then I'll take more discussions and questions. Let's review the 3 debates, and then we'll see how it translates into halacha. It's really fascinating to see how it comes out practically. Okay, debate number one, remember the Rambam versus Tosfos, the obligation. According to Rambam, it's biblical these days. According to Tosfos, rabbinic, right? Everyone with me? What was debate number two? Bahag versus Tosfos. Counting by day. According to Tosfos, is not an option. According to Bahag, it's totally fine. You count by day with a bracha. According to Tosfos, there's no point of counting by day. It's not. You're not. That's not how the Torah says to count. You have to count from the night. And debate number three was if one missed a day. According to Bahag, it's over. Try again next year. According to Tosfos, you're good with a bracha. If you miss a few days, you still have a mitzvah to count with a bracha, but just count by night, or else it's not a good count. You can't count anymore. Oh, yeah, only by night you have to count in order to be able to do it. And according to Bahag, no, you missed a day. Bahag says totally count by day. Counting by day, according to Bahag, is fine. Just don't miss a whole 24-hour day, or else you can never count anymore. There's no point anymore, even without a blessing. All right? Now let's see. Note to self, pay attention. Two more brief introductions, then we'll see how it evolves into practical halacha. Okay, so first of all, there's a concept, it's one of the 10 commandments, the third one, taking Hashem's name in vain, which includes many ideas, and one of them is, don't take Hashem's name lightly. We don't just say Hashem's name when there's we can't just say a blessing. If you're in the middle of drinking water, you don't remember if you recited a blessing, you're not allowed to say a blessing again. Even though it's such an important concept, it's like stealing and you have to say a blessing before you eat. Yeah, but the chance of saying God's name in vain is more serious. There are exceptions, like if you ate properly, like washed, and you have to daber chasam and you're really not sure if you did it, so that's a biblical obligation. So then it's fine, then it's stronger. But anytime there's a question in blessing, most of the time you just don't say it because it's more serious to say Hashem's name lightly, which is included in having reverence for Hashem. That's the concept of Safek Brachas Lahakal. This is what it's known. That if there's a doubt in a matter of blessings, you have to be lenient. Not because we're being lenient in something serious, because we're being strict in taking Hashem's name in vain. And now another introduction is not all doubts are equal. This is what Nadav was saying in the beginning. There's a regular doubt. And what if you did two doubts combined? It's not a 50%. It becomes like a 75%. So Allah recognizes that as well. And also there's rabbinic doubts. Like we just said, in rabbinic things you could be lenient, like we mentioned. Tosfos mentioned earlier. I think that's why you could count earlier. According to Tosfos. The Rambam wouldn't say you could count early, because he said it was biblical. Now we can understand all the laws that we said. Look how it ends up in Shulchan Aruch in the practical laws. Okay? What if the law if someone forgot to count one night? What is the law? Let's take it from the top. Well, that's debate number 2, no? According to Bahag, just count by day with a blessing, right? According to Tosfos, do not count by day. Who's right? Anyone? Who's right?
Asking him?
Who's right? You know who's right? Tosfos or Bahag?
Neither one.
We don't know. We don't know who's right. How could we? It's not that you can't just decide that. So you know what we do? What do?
Count by day.
You must count the next day, but you can't do a blessing because of the principle we just learned. See how the halacha ends up? Tosfos, because of Tosfos, Tosfos says you shouldn't count by day, but he says there's no point of counting by day because there's no mitzvah. But Bahag says yeah, so maybe Bahag is right. But the Bahag says to count with a blessing, but you can't do that because maybe Tosfos is right, and you can't. It's a suffix if you have to say a blessing or not. It's a doubt. Maybe Tosfos is right. So suffix brachas lahakel. Whenever you have a saying God's name in vain, you can't. But you have an obligation to count by day if you miss the night, because maybe the Bahag is right. You still have a total mitzvah to count by day. So that's how the first step evolves. See how the halacha translates. Let's continue. What about the next night? Debate number 2. Bahag would say you never missed because it's okay to count by day. You missed the night, you counted by day. But according to the Bahag, did you miss anything? No, because you're allowed to count by day, even with a blessing. So according to the Bahag, you're good. And according to Tosfos, even if you miss a day, you keep counting with a bracha. So either way, everyone agrees you can resume counting with a blessing. Because Bahag says you never missed. If you missed by night and count by day, that's great, Bahag says. You never missed a day. So you could count. So, and Bahag says it's only a problem if you missed a 24-hour period. According to Taisvis, even if you miss a day, you anyways count with the bracha. Even if you miss 10 days, you keep counting with the bracha. So what's the conclusion? You resume counting with the blessing.
According to both of them.
Yeah, let's do the next scenario. What is the law if someone forgot to count an entire day? Debate number 2 was, Bahag says try again next year. Taisvis says keep counting with the bracha. So what do? Who's right? We don't know. So what can we do? They must count the next day without a blessing. You still have to count, because according to Taisvis, you're really supposed to keep counting with a bracha. But out of deference for Bahag, maybe Bahag is right, and you no longer could count, so you can't say the bracha because you might be saying God's name in vain. So you have to keep counting, but without a blessing. Are you with me? What if someone is not sure if he counted last night? This is really Gishma. You ready? What if someone's not sure if he counted last night? What should you do? According to Bahag, count by day with a blessing. Because you're not sure.
So
Point to-
how could he count by day with a blessing? He suffered brachis. Maybe he
Well-
maybe he did.
Well, if you're not sure, right. Okay, you could count, but you should count by day. Taisha says no point in counting by day. Yes, not correct. The point is count by day. Now, what the thing is like this. We don't know who's right. Right? We don't know. So what do? So you have to count the next day without a blessing. You can't because you're not sure, right? And maybe the Bahag is right, and there's no harm in this. But what about the next day? Here it gets. What if someone's not sure if he counted last night and did not count by day? Here, this is what I want to bring out. Okay? What if I'm not sure I counted last night and I for sure did not count by day? Look how it would work. According to Bahag, according to all opinions besides the Rambam, it's only rabbinic. So keep counting because maybe you never missed, but without a blessing, because maybe you missed, maybe you didn't. According to the Bahag, if you missed a full day, you can no longer count with the blessing.
You don't count at all.
What?
You don't count at all.
Well, you don't have to count, but since it's according to the Rambam, it's biblical. So you should be stringent in the counting, but you can't be stringent in the blessing because you might be saying God's name in vain. According to Taisvis, continue counting with the blessing.
According to
What if someone's not sure if he counted last night and did not count by day? So according to Bahag, you should keep counting but without a blessing. According to Taisvis, you keep counting with a blessing. Right? Now listen to this.
According to their Bahag, why did he count with
Without a blessing. Why? Because Bahag says, according to all opinions, it's only rabbinic, besides according to the Rambam. According to the Rambam, it's biblical, right? So keep counting, because the Rambam, because it's a suffix. Maybe you did count, and maybe you didn't miss a day, because you might have counted at night, right? So if maybe you did count, so you have an obligation to keep doing it, because you didn't miss a day. It's a suffix, and the Rambam says it's biblical suffix. The Rambam would say you even count with a bracha, but according since it's a doubt if you count it, so the Bahag would say you have to keep counting, but without a bracha. Taisha says keep counting with the bracha, because who cares if you miss a day? That's Taisha's opinion. That's the debate at that point. But what about us? We have a new doubt now. We have a double doubt. Perhaps the halacha follows Taisvis, and even if it doesn't follow Taisvis, even if the halacha follows Bahag, perhaps he did not in fact miss a day. You see this? You see how it works? So what do? They resume counting with the bracha. Because you have 2 points in favor of counting with the bracha. If you have a 50-50 doubt if you counted one night, and you're sure you didn't count the next day, according to Taisus, anyways keep counting with the bracha. According to Bahag, maybe you should count without a bracha because maybe you missed, maybe you didn't. So don't count with the bracha. But we don't know who's right. So first of all, according to Taisvis, this is 150-50. Maybe Taisus is right, maybe Bahag is right. So I should count with the bracha. And even if Bahag is right, maybe I count it. So we combine both, and now it's like already 75. So you could count with a bracha. We combine both doubts, the halachic doubt and the reality doubt. The halachic doubt is the halacha like Taisus, or is the halacha like Bahag?
Fake.
Yes. All right. I hope you got a little